Alright, fuck it, we're gonna do this one live, unscripted, guys, because this article deserves no effort whatsoever from me, because the writer clearly didn't put effort into it. So this is the article here. It's called End of the Affair, Why It's Time to Cancel Quentin Tarantino by Roy Chaco. It's a very soy name, it's not a very woody name, is it? Whatever the merits of his new film, Tarantino's films have revelled in extreme violence against female characters. This has to stop. So Tarantino's films have revelled in extreme violence against female characters. Keep that in mind, guys, because those of you who have watched pretty much all his films, like I have, you know that this isn't actually the case. But hey, you know what? Let's not jump the gun here, guys. Let's get into the article first, shall we? When news broke early last year that Quentin Tarantino had cajoled Uma Thurman into driving an unsafe car during the filming of Kill Bill, which resulted in a crash, the director called it the biggest regret of his life. He didn't cajole her into it, she did all her own driving stunts herself. I think she did quite a lot of the stunts herself. She was more than willing to do it, and she was well aware of the risks. He was well aware of the risks. What he regrets was putting her in harm's way and not using their stuntman who was there just in case there was something that they couldn't risk her doing. He should have let the man do it, or the woman do it, whoever it was. I think it was that woman that may have been in Death Proof. I think she was the one who was doing some of the stunts that were too dangerous for Uma Thurman to do. But regardless, they all knew the risks, and Uma Thurman was injured, but she managed to survive, obviously, otherwise she wouldn't be working today still. And she forgave Quentin Tarantino ages ago. They're like platonic friends. In fact, at one point, I do believe they were romantically involved some years ago. But this was what sparked the progressive left's hatred of Quentin Tarantino. This strange story where things happen constantly on sets, you know, accidents, cuts, bruises, crashes. Apparently this was such a bad thing because it happened to Uma Thurman and it happens to be Quentin Tarantino, who is unapologetically edgy. Soon after, reports came out that he had spat on Thurman during filming and choked her in one scene, as well as strangling Diane Kruger in a scene in Inglourious Basterds. The question now is it time to cancel Quentin Tarantino? Firstly, he didn't actually strangle her. He may have put some force on her neck, but that was to make it look real. It's acting. Plus, it was meant to be a directorial cameo. Also, there really was no evidence he actually did spit on Thurman, and again, they're platonic friends. I highly doubt he would ever do such a thing to Uma Thurman. It doesn't make any sense. And again, I've not seen her ever say that this has actually happened. It's just lies and slander at this point. I'm surprised he hasn't sued The Guardian and other rags that have decided to shit on all over his character. His latest film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, has provoked considerable unease as it takes on the gruesome subject of the murder of Sharon Tate, among others, by the Manson family in 1969. His interest in savage violence against women is, if we look back, a common thread in almost all his films. No, it's not a common thread in almost all his films. People getting killed is a common thread in all his films, because I don't know if you noticed this, but what he does is use violence as an aesthetic. I forgot the artistic word for it, but this is an actual thing. He uses violence to express things in his films. It's not real, doesn't reflect him as a person or anybody else. It's used as a storytelling device. It is used for effect. It is not real. None of this is real. Just because it's women being killed, or mostly men, actually, as it is in his films, says nothing at all. And by the way, I really am sick of this cancel culture. It's toxic. It's horrible. All it does is ruin people's lives. When somebody dares to say something or does something that actually isn't actually that bad in real life, it isn't that bad at all, but because these particular people, these particularly leftist people, enjoy just shitting on people and destroying their lives because they happen to just step just a little bit outside the status quo, they have to be punished. People have had their lives ruined because of this. Vic McNona, however you pronounce his name right now, is going through a torrid time. He's done absolutely nothing wrong but be intimate with fans, not even in a sexual way. He's hugging them, maybe a peck on the cheek at that, and apparently that's him being a predator, even though he's had hundreds, thousands of people come out in support of him. The cancel culture is being spurred on by people in the mainstream media and SJWs that have infested nerd culture, and now we're seeing the same thing in film culture. In Tarantino's debut directorial feature, Reservoir Dogs, the only female characters in the credits are Shot Woman and Shocked Woman. So 2 women, 1 was shot, the rest are all men who got killed. That's 99% of all the victims. Reservoir Dogs. Your first example is Reservoir Dogs. It shows you don't actually know much about his films. Pulp Fiction. His second film features female characters more prominently, but a trend of reveling in the abuse of women began to emerge. One of Pulp Fiction's most famous scenes involves Uma Thurman's character character getting stabbed in the heart with a shot of adrenaline to resuscitate her after a drug overdose, though it's fair to say male characters were also subjected to extreme violence. So hang on a sec. Uma Thurman's character accidentally snorts too much heroin because she thought it was cocaine, and apparently John Travolta and whoever the other character was who had the adrenaline stabbing her in the chest, because that's what you have to do with a needle like that in order to save her life, is apparently extreme violence. How is that extreme violence? That's the opposite of extreme violence. That's saving somebody's life. That's the type of stuff you see in ER. That's what you see in Casualty and Holby City and all the other hospital dramas. That's tame. That's not extreme violence. That's not violence against women. That's saving women. I don't think a single woman in Pulp Fiction dies. I don't think any of the principal female characters die. John Travolta dies. Spoilers, guys, I'm sorry. Loads of henchmen and drug dealers and random men die, but as far as I'm aware, no women die in my favourite film of all time. I really just don't remember that. At least he pays lip service to men who get killed, although it's in parentheses, downplaying it because even though men are always the majority of the deaths in his films, but whatever. The Kill Bill films were a cinematic orgy of on-screen violence, most of it directed at Thurman. Well yeah, because she's on a revenge plot. And by the way, she's the one actually dishing out the violence. She's out for revenge to kill the main man, Bill. And by the way, she also kills women. And so I don't understand how a woman killing other women in the film is bad, but apparently because she gets hurt in the film, somehow that's bad, even though that's what spurs her on to become stronger and more powerful than they could have possibly imagined. Doesn't make any sense, guys, does it? Her character is severely beaten throughout and buried alive. Well, yeah, that's what happens when you're fighting people and shooting people and using swords and stuff like that. That's what happens. The same thing happened to Luke Skywalker, Han Solo. It happened to all sorts of characters. It's even happened in children's films where people get beat up and then become stronger and beat up the bully or they kill the bad guy. I don't understand how this is a big deal. Daryl Hannah's character, Ellie Driver, doesn't fare much better. She has both her eyes pulled out. I'm pretty sure the first one that was pulled out was off screen or something. I can't remember. That was something that made her famous for having her eye pulled out, and so what? It was by Uma Thurman, not Tarantino, not by some male character. And even if it was, so what? Things reached a peak with Tarantino's 2015 western The Hateful Eight. Jennifer Jason Leigh's character is handcuffed to a corpse and beaten and tortured throughout the film. She wasn't necessarily tortured, she was beaten because she was actually trying to kill Samuel L. Jackson and Kurt Russell. She was the bad guy, one of many. She's not a hapless victim, she's the one trying to victimise. I like how he just ignores the context of these films and just says, because violence happens on a character that happens to be female, therefore it's bad. This isn't even an argument. And by the way, he completely misses Death Proof, where not only in the first half of the film Kurt Russell kills a group of girls, by the end, he's the one who is killed by a group of girls. In a rather really bad ending, I think, where he just cowers and is a pussy and his death is kind of meaningless and somehow his face gets caved in by a woman with heels. Don't think is necessarily possible. I don't think any of those women had the strength of Wonder Woman to do that, but whatever. You can't mention that because that destroys his argument. Even though Kill Bill destroys his argument anyway, even though Reservoir Dogs destroys his argument, pretty much every film he's mentioned here is contradictory to his argument. Death Proof is the one thing he can actually mention. The question remains whether we should continue to indulge the director's fondness for piling abuse on women, particularly in light of his own admission of acting out scenes of physical violence towards his female actors, even if he claims it is in pursuit of the perfect shot. Acting. It's not real. None of this is real. You guys have no sense of reality, do you? They honestly do this with video games as well. When a woman is portrayed, even having a midriff in the film, or particularly a video game if it's Anita Sarkeesian, apparently that's doing something bad to women in real life. I don't know how. I don't know why. I've struggled 5 years to reason with this and come up with an explanation other than these people have no sense of reality or they're just disingenuous or both. It's acting. He's a director and an actor. That woman was an actor and was okay with it. They're all okay with it. They wouldn't have done it if they were okay with it. You do realise that they sign contracts and have health and safety and things like that in Hollywood, right? They're not allowed to actually hurt the actors and actresses unless they have permission to do so. By the way, in Fight Club, one of the actors was slapped in real life. It was a male one, he was an extra. It was the guy who, near the end, Brad Pitt slaps. Apparently he got slapped a fair few times because the director wasn't happy with the sound. He was actually capturing the real sound on the mics and the guy got fed up and left the set. Understandably so. Not a peep from The Guardian here. And by the way, in Hong Kong films, a lot of them, the violence is real, for the most part. They will punch people, they will throw people on the ground, they will do actual things. Bruce Lee actually hurt people. Now, not to an insane degree. I mean, if you've ever seen Jackie Chan interviewed about Bruce Lee, you know, they weren't always hitting people. Like, they weren't actually hitting people with sticks and nunchucks and stuff like that. It was mainly punches and kicks. But it's mostly against men. But you don't seem to complain about that. One of the characters in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is Tate's husband, Roman Polanski. Early last year, soon after Tarantino got into hot water over the revelations of his on-set behaviour, an audio recording emerged from a 2003 interview in which he said that he didn't think that Polanski's sexual assault of a 13-year-old girl in 1977 should have been classified as rape. Tarantino said she was down with it, and that Polanski had sex with a minor. That's not rape. He shouldn't have said that. But that doesn't reflect on these films. And by the way, he apologised. He said it was wrong, he was ignorant. Now, I've not heard the full clip, so I don't know what his justifications were. I don't know if he was talking about, because remember there's several different types of rape. Is he talking about statutory rape? Was he saying it's not rape in the sense that she didn't consent, therefore it's not rape? Or is he talking about statutory rape, where regardless of if she consented or not, it is rape? Regardless, from what you're saying, it's wrong, he shouldn't have said that. I disagree with that thoroughly. And for whatever reason, he said that in 2003. I don't know why he said it. But again, what's that actually got to do with anything? He was wrong, he admitted he was wrong, surely we should move on. And by the way, there's been plenty of people in Hollywood, male and female, who have made excuses for Polanski. In fact, I think I remember Natasha Kinski has also made excuses for him, or has justified her relationships with him, because she was also quite young when she was involved with him during the making of Tess and the D'Urbervilles. She was I think she was 16, 17, and she claims that she was okay. Is she now just as bad as Tarantino? You see how complicated these things get? I'm only playing devil's advocate, but if we're going to attack Tarantino for that, what about Natasha Kinski? At the time, it led to widespread condemnation, but after Once Upon a Time in Hollywood premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in May, the calls to cancel him have died down, because people realise that people change and move on after nearly 20 years. But it seems like people like you just can't get that. And by the way, was the full context of the clip ever actually revealed? Was this just something that was a clip of a much longer, expansive interview? Because if it's one thing we know about Tarantino, he loves to waffle. The next film might be different, and we might see a more contrite Tarantino, but we have to ask whether we should bother to find out the answer. You will find the answer, because his next film will be a Star Trek film, and it's going to be R-rated and violent, and have swear words, and possibly women dying in it. Because Tarantino doesn't change for anybody. He'll apologise for things that he believed he messed up on, but he will never ever, as far as I'm aware and what I've seen, sacrifice his art to pander to you. In fact, we've seen this all the way through the years. There's an interview of him during the release of Kill Bill where he has an argument with this woman who was a critic and didn't like it because it was overly violent. Now, she didn't phrase her distaste in regards to women, but she didn't like how overly violent it was, and he basically took her to task. And I say go for it. I think he should continue to do what he does until he decides he wants to retire, which he's been going on about for years, and write his books. He's done nothing wrong here. He's done nothing but make his films. He has the gall, apparently, to kill off female characters, because apparently female characters nowadays can't die in films. For some reason, we're just not allowed to show it. Women die. Men die. That's a fact of life. Whether it be violent, whether it be through passing away peacefully in your sleep, who knows? People die. That is almost as moronic as during the 1920s, when during the Hays Code, when that was being introduced, women weren't even allowed to be shown drinking until Hollywood's censors realised, yeah, that's moronic, everybody knows women drink. So basically, we can't have women being evil in the film, because SJWs don't seem to like that. We can't have them being shown having anything bad happen to them. They just have to be good at everything, and they have to overpower everything. And if it's a man doing it, it's bad. And by the way, there's a book that's out that some of you may have seen me reference on Twitter called The Power, and the synopsis, and I'm just paraphrasing it from memory, guys, the synopsis is this: in a world where women, all of a sudden, randomly out of nowhere, God knows how they got this power, but they get the power. Genius, I know. And the power allows them to create suffering onto anybody. It's a weird cosmic power, who knows what it is. And who do they turn their powers against? Men. And at the end, and I'm paraphrasing this, I'm not quoting this verbatim, I'm not trying to quote it verbatim, that men suddenly find their control in danger, or something like that. This is a power fantasy. Now, feminists go on about male power fantasies, now bad they are, Conan the Barbarian, Gears of War, Call of Duty, things like that. But this is a female power fantasy, and unlike those other power fantasies where it's just, whether it's being a brave barbarian like Conan, or being a tough British soldier like in Gears of War and Call of Duty, in this, it's purely being a sadistic person, acting out your desires of revenge on all men, all your gripes, all your fears, everything. That's what it is. That apparently is A-OK, and that can be recommended on Kindle and become a bestseller. But apparently Quentin Tarantino can't show women being hurt, but it's totally fine to create a book that, judging from the synopsis, has a sadistic story where men get tortured and have to go through incredible pain for perceived ills. If Quentin Tarantino writes a book, which he wants to write books when he retires from film, and he wrote a book like that, you can guarantee that this Guardian author would be very annoyed at that. But hey, you know what? It's okay when they do it, guys. And I think that's it. I'm glad that this article was really short. Usually these articles go on and on and on, and it just gets boring and really annoying and frustrating. But this one was a short, brief amount of stupidity, and I'm glad that is the case. I'm absolutely gobsmacked that they continue to attack him. I just don't know where this comes from, other than that one quote, even though he's not the only person, male or female, to have made excuses for Roman Polanski, or the only director, male or female, to have put actors' lives in danger, even though this particular actress, Uma Thurman, was ready and willing to do so, and the other person who was quote-unquote choked was okay with it, because she also wanted it to be real, because that's what we do for art, guys. But anyway, I'm going to leave it there. This guy does not deserve my attention anymore, and until next time, I'll see you later.